If you want to become the best runner you can be and actually get better as you age, you cannot train the same at 50 as you do at 20. And even though it's inevitable that we get slower as we age, recent studies have shown that there are specific training strategies we can use to prevent that and actually run faster and stay injury-free no matter how old we are. My name is Nicklas, I'm a sports scientist, physiotherapist, and former professional triathlete. And there are 3 factors to running well as we age: how we train, how much we train, and what we focus on in each decade of life. But first, what does the science even say about training as we age? This review from 2015 found that we see a decline in performance from the age of 35. Meaning, up until that point, if we train consistently and train smart, we can improve year over year. But after the age of 35, even if we train for 10 hours per week over decades, our performance will still drop. The review also found that our VO2 max, which is a key predictor of running performance, actually drops by 10% per decade after the age of 25. That's a 1% decline per year. I know all of this might sound a bit demotivating, but before you start thinking everything is lost, there are specific training strategies that we can use to prevent this decline and in some cases even get better as we age. But before I show you exactly how to do that, we first need to understand why running performance declines as we age. Because it's probably not what you think. So let's break down exactly what happens to your running performance as we age in plain English. There are a few things that we probably can't do anything about, and then there are some things that are completely in our control. Let's start by looking at the things that we probably can't control. No matter how fit you are, your maximum heart rate will drop by about 3 to 5% per decade. That means your heart can't pump as fast. This in turn limits how much blood and oxygen you can deliver to your muscles during hard, intense workouts. How well your body uses oxygen also drops over time. Think of it as your muscles just getting a little bit less efficient at pulling oxygen from the blood. Your lactate threshold, or basically how fast you can go before burning out, also decrease as we age. We can still work at a high percentage of our VO2 max, but that top end sustainable speed, it just fades over time. So that begs the question: what can we control? This review from 2015 found that even though VO2 max declines by about 10% per decade after age 25, and we also see a decline in muscle mass from around age 40, it's mainly due to a reduced training stimulus. You know the feeling. Life just gets in the way. Suddenly you have a family and a full-time job, and the time and energy to go running is just not the same as it used to be. I know that's what happened to me at least. For most people, this leads to a decrease in motivation. They no longer have training partners and coaching supports, and consistency just drops. We are also more prone to injuries as we get older. And so, because we don't train when we are injured, we also see a decrease in performance. But the review found something interesting. You see, unlike other factors like your maximum heart rate or your lactate threshold, how efficiently you run does not decline with age. If you keep training, you can stay efficient for decades. And here's the kicker: you can even improve your running economy and thereby get faster. So if you know that there's different factors that influence how we can run and how we can train at different stages in our lives, then how do we maximize that training to make sure that we maximize our performance and avoid injuries? Let me break down a practical way of training in each decade. And if you want a science-backed training plan that helps you no matter how old you are, then check out the description below. Now let's start with the first decade of life. At age 0 to 10, the focus is just to develop fundamental movement skills. This is the most important phase of life for building balance and movement patterns and coordination. Kids should not follow a structured training plan, but they should move a lot. Jumping, skipping, sprinting, playing laser tag, anything that gets them moving is just great. When you see a kid climbing a tree or riding a skateboard, then they are building neuromuscular efficiency and neuromuscular control. This general athleticism builds a great foundation for running later in life. The key here is variety and fun, not volume. Then we move on to the second decade of life, from age 10 to 20. Now the focus is to build the engine and train the brain. This is when kids become teenagers and their aerobic engine is like a sponge. It's the best time to build aerobic capacity, mental discipline, and running biomechanics. This is also where we start to introduce some structured training with some long runs and some intervals, and maybe even a weekly schedule. But we need to do it with proper progression, because it's also in this decade that most people burn out. So we need to not overdo volume and train like the professionals in their 20s. We still need to have fun. We still need to be part of a training group, and we're just developing that love for running for life. We must not forget to have fun, which of course is true for all decades of life, but especially for teenagers. Strength training should also be introduced in this decade of life to take advantage of those raging hormones, but also just to get into the habit of lifting and lifting properly. At the age between 20 and 30, it's time to maximize performance and chase those PBs. In the past, we thought that runners peaked in their late 30s, and even though some still do, we've seen over the last few years that the golden decade for running is probably in our 20s. Recovery is lightning fast, your hormones are at their peak, and your ceiling is just at its highest. You can handle more intensity, more volume, and higher frequency. This is the time to chase lifetime PBs and really put in the work. But it's also the time to start training durability. Strength training, mobility work, and smart periodization will set you up for longevity. If you skip this now, you'll pay for it in your 40s. Then we move into our 30s. Now we want to maintain peak fitness or maybe even increase it a bit, but also start to adapt recovery. Let me be perfectly clear. You can still achieve personal bests in your 30s and even in your 40s. In fact, many elite marathoners peak here, but recovery starts to slow down. You may not notice it at first, but it's time to be smart with your training. Life gets in the way, and we need to cut the junk miles. Focus on quality workout, periodized training, and strategic rest. Make sure to include some strength training to preserve muscle mass and to avoid those injuries at all costs. If you did not start running when you were 10 years old, you can probably still improve that VO2 max ceiling, especially with structured and purposeful training. From age 40 to 50, we need to start prioritizing strength training and mobility work. This is when the decline in muscle mass, also known as sarcopenia, starts to creep in unless we actively fight it. Heavy strength training at least twice per week become a non-negotiable if you want to run the fastest you possibly can. You can still run fast, but your training needs more intention. We still need to do VO2 max intervals to prevent that decline, because if we do VO2 max intervals, the decline will be way less than if we don't, and we should also include some plyometrics to preserve our power. Mobility work can also help offset that stiffness that comes with age. But to be honest, full range of motion strength work can also help with that. And if you want to do a ton of volume, then doing some cross training can be a very smart idea. Meaning, instead of running more miles, you can do some swimming or some cycling to still get that aerobic base. Basically, if you want more volume, then it's great to go with a lower impact option. Then we move into our 50s. You can still run hard, and you should, but our ability to recover is just not what it used to be, so we can't do back-to-back VO2 max sessions. We need to plan for more recovery between intense sessions. But if you don't push your limits with some VO2 max work, then you're going to see a rapid decline. So even though we're getting older, it does not mean that we should not have high-intensity interval training. It just means that we need more recovery in between sessions, and we need to keep that strength training habit alive. It's also a great idea to do some strides or some sprints to keep that neuromuscular activation high. Power training, like bounding, is actually also key here. You see, we need to hold on to that explosiveness. It helps preserve falls, maintain coordination, and maintain running efficiency. So don't shy away from effort, just be smart about it and treat recovery like a good friend. Then as we move into age 60 to 70, we need to start treating movement as medicine. Training volume might drop a bit because our ability to recover is just far from what it was in our 20s. But frequency can absolutely remain. We can still run often, but just with lower intensity. Focus on joint mobility, strength, and then try to improve those running biomechanics. And cross-training becomes even more valuable. Cycling, pole running, swimming, brisk walking, everything that keeps us moving just helps us stay fit and injury-free. Light plyometrics and fast strides can help us keep our nervous system sharp. And you guessed it, high-intensity efforts are still something that we need to keep doing. From age 70 and beyond, the goal is now independence and vitality. The best runners in their 70s are still doing strides, strength work, and VO2 max intervals. Some are even doing Ironmans. So don't let some limiting beliefs tell you that you just have to slow down and sit in a chair just because you're 70. You can absolutely crush it in your 70s. In fact, I have a grandmother who is 85, and she trains 2 hours per day and even run 10Ks. But the goal is to keep moving, stay functional, and just enjoy the freedom that running brings. So what's the best way to train as we get older? Build the engine in your teens. Maximize your performance in your 20s. Maintain peak fitness and adapt recovery in your 30s. Prioritize strength and mobility in your 40s. In your 50s and beyond, it's about smart periodization, training with intensity, and really just enjoying everything that running brings. But if you're not using periodization and training smart, it does not matter how old you are, you're never going to reach your true potential. So to make sure you don't waste your hard training sessions, you should watch this video next, where I'll teach you exactly how to run faster for longer.